Welcome to the news at Trash Panda Revelry. Here's some of the news this week. Trump influencer Laura Loomer has now had a change of heart on Ukraine, saying she was bamboozled by Russian propaganda before. How exactly were you bamboozled? And where did you even get access? Were you living in Moscow with Tucker Carlson, just suckling at the teat of Putin's propaganda machine? What kind of genius with access to US news coverage looked at the facts and believed that Ukraine was some horrible aggressor? Never mind, it's MAGA, so I know looking at facts is entirely optional. But it is good to see that she's at least taking a break from hunting down and purging disloyalty long enough to realize the situation in Ukraine. I mean, hell, even McCarthy took a break every now and then. On a related note, it's been cited that the Russia-Ukraine war has now cost as many lives as the siege of Stalingrad did during World War II. A battle that helped turn the tide of the war and that is very important in Russian history and culture. The irony, of course, is that famously heroic battle, it was the Russians who were attacked by an aggressive outside force, led by an egomaniac bent on territorial expansion. Whereas now they are that same aggressor, setting siege to Ukraine. There's no joke there, really. I'm just noting the very obvious comparison. You know, for those of you who are still bamboozled. In other news, Kalshi threatened to sue Netflix this week if it didn't take down a new trailer for a Netflix documentary about prediction markets, like Kalshi and Polymarket, that shows these markets as being very similar to betting. Yeah, Netflix, these are prediction markets. Markets where you put up money based on what you think is going to happen, and then if it does, you win more money. So yeah, that's nothing like gambling. In other news, the Trump administration has ordered warning signs put in front of the Smithsonian museums, pointing them towards a White House report claiming that the current Smithsonian exhibits represent radical ideologies of, I guess, historical accuracy and scholarship. And well, we'd really just prefer it if we never talk about how a lot of white ancestors did some bad stuff, and we think it's better when we just ignore all that. Look, America is a great country, but you don't recognize all of its remarkable and complex legacy by sweeping the past and its echoes in the present under the rug. Or by pretending that a wonderfully diverse gumbo pot of a country, which is a strength, is really just a reductive one-ingredient puree. In other news, the Trump administration admitted in court filings recently that it had canceled green energy contracts in various states. Not based on efficiency, but only in the states that voted for Harris. And this also seems somewhat in line with Trump's continued general attacks on wind power as well. Like, "There shall be no wind power, for I must be the one who blows all the hot air." And the contract cancellations continue what has been an obviously dangerous pattern of retribution for a sitting president, with related recent examples like James Comey, Letitia James, and Jack Smith, among many, many others. Trump, who had accused the DOJ of targeting political enemies during the last administration, has now been correcting this by using the DOJ to target political enemies. In other news, Border Czar Tom Homan says they are reviewing their vetting of ICE agents after several recent shootings of immigrants. Wait, so you're saying that paying randos $50,000 to stop playing COD and get off the couch, handing them a gun and saying, "Go get them Latinos," wasn't a good process? Huh. In other news, Trump is taking aim at the convenience of mail-in voting again, even though he has used it himself, and is asking the Supreme Court to help limit the option, which he says is inherently corrupt. But similar to other past instances of voter fraud, a recent Brookings Institute study found very limited actual cases, only about 4 cases of fraud in every 10 million votes. Just how will democracy survive? But overall, many do agree that democracy does have to be protected from anything that is inherently corrupt. In other news, recent cyber attacks have struck water utility systems in several states. Authorities believe Iran to be one of the primary suspects, But President Trump has another theory. At a cabinet meeting at Camp David, Trump stated that he believed Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota was to blame, without, of course, any proof whatsoever. Yeah, it's these kinds of well-balanced statements of fact that make Trump such a reliable leader. But that's alright. I'm sure tomorrow we'll get proof. In the form of an AI image of Tim Walz running around sabotaging everybody's water heaters like some sort of weird little water gremlin. I might actually be looking forward to that. And finally, the Trump administration has now banned the import of all humanoid robots from foreign countries, to include industry leader China, saying, when the AI robot revolution comes and we all end up in weird human slave labor camps working for our robot overlords, we want them robot overlords to have been made in America. And that's all the news for the week. See you next time.